maintain confidence in the economy. This is precisely why the European Central Bank was established in 1998 with the primary objective of maintaining price stability alongside a secondary objective of supporting the general economic policies of the Union. In the years following the COVID pandemic, inflation rose to concerning levels. While inflation appears to have stabilized now, we must remain vigilant regarding the potential resurgence of inflation, especially given the political situation, the geopolitical situation, and also exchange rate fluctuations that pose significant risks. To effectively preserve price stability, the ECB must maintain its political independence. In a fiat money world, the credibility of a central bank and the trust it garners from the public are crucial assets for fulfilling its mandate. History provides ample evidence that direct political intervention or interference with central bank independence invariably leads to inflation, financial instability, and even nasty political turmoil. However, independence does not equate to a lack of accountability. The ECB is accountable to the European Parliament, and this accountability must be meaningful. Strong institutional design and robust accountability mechanisms are essential. Our report encourages the ECB to explore ways to enhance the transparency and comprehensibility of its decision-making processes for both citizens and policymakers. Political independence also necessitates the ECB's actions to remain apolitical. Reaffirming the ECB's independence is particularly vital in the current global context where central bank independence is facing increased pressure. Rising debt levels heighten the risk of what they call fiscal dominance, the situation where fiscal needs and debt financing issues increasingly dictate monetary policy. The threat to independence is especially pronounced in the United States, where actions and comments from the current president regarding the Federal Reserve and its leadership not only undermine the internal financial stability of the United States, but also have significant international consequences given the dollar's dominant role. These challenges exacerbate the broader financial stability risks we already encounter today. The ECB plays a crucial role in safeguarding financial stability through credit conditions, the single supervisory mechanism, and in responding to potential future crises. However, an increasing share of financial activity occurs beyond its direct supervisory reach, particularly with the non-bank financial intermediation sector, whose growth rate is really, let's say, impressive. Concurrently, closer scrutiny of the largely speculative crypto asset ecosystem, including stablecoins, is absolutely necessary. Both monetary and financial stability are, colleagues, like electricity or clean water. Their true importance is only recognized when they are absent. Effective monetary policy can primarily prevent money itself from becoming a significant source of economic disturbance. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much, sir. I'll now give the floor to the President of the European Central Bank, Christine Lagarde.
So good afternoon, bon après-midi to all of you. Honourable Vice President of the European Parliament, Honourable Rapporteur, Mr. van Overtveld, Honourable Commissioner Dombrovskis, all members of the European Parliament, all honourable indeed. It is a real pleasure to be back in this plenary chamber for the debate on your draft resolution of the ECB's annual report. Today's moment is critically important in our accountability to you, the elected representatives of the European Union. I have read your report with great interest, Monsieur le Rapporteur. Your resolution and your speaking point this afternoon, underscores that the ECB's independence is essential for us to deliver on our mandate of price stability. At a time when central bank independence is being challenged in parts of the world, your clear support sends an important signal to us. But as you also emphasize in your report, independence does not mean isolation. The ECB does not stand apart from democratic scrutiny. Our independence goes hand in hand with accountability to this Parliament. Regular hearings, written exchanges, and our annual report all reflect this commitment. And our dialogue today continues this process of scrutiny, explanation, and a vibrant dialogue. In my remarks, I will address issues you raised in your resolution, with a particular focus on strengthening Europe's resilience and competitiveness in a challenging global environment. So let me start with this imperative of stability in an uncertain environment. When I appeared before the Committee on Economic and Monetary Affairs last October, I described how geopolitical shifts were reshaping Europe's place in the world. We are operating in a volatile global environment marked by heightened geopolitical tensions and persistent policy uncertainty. These developments are affecting trade flows, energy security, and strategic dependencies. Supply chains are becoming more fragmented, and industrial policies are reshaping global competition. In this environment, we need strong domestic anchors of stability and resilience, and one such anchor is price stability, which, as your resolution rightly underlines, is a necessary condition for sustainable growth, competitiveness, and investment. After the pandemic and Russia's unjustified invasion of Ukraine, the ECB had to navigate the most challenging episode of high inflation. Remember, it reached 10.6%. All of that since the introduction of the euro. It had never been so high. This picture has changed significantly, and I will mention how. But the challenges are still there. They're different. Today's inflation, latest reading in January, stood at 1.7%, and we expect inflation to stabilize sustainably at our 2% medium-term target. According to the latest Eurosystem staff projections from December, headline inflation is expected to average 1.9% in 2026, 1.8% in 2027, and 2% in 2028. At the same time, despite the challenging environment, economic activity in the euro area has been resilient. The economy is estimated to have grown by 0.3% in the fourth quarter of last year and by 1.5% in 2025 as a whole, better than what was projected for 2025 at the start of the year. At our meeting last Thursday, the Governing Council decided to keep interest rates unchanged, as our updated assessment reconfirmed that inflation should stabilize at our 2% in the medium term. In the current uncertain environment, our data-dependent, meeting-by-meeting approach to monetary policy serves us well. We will continue to follow this approach, basing our decisions on our evolving assessment of the inflation outlook and the risks surrounding it, in light of the incoming economic and financial data, as well as the dynamics of underlying inflation and the strength of monetary policy transmission. By fulfilling its mandate, the ECB provides a key source of stability for the euro area economy and an anchor in an increasingly uncertain world. But as your resolution rightly highlights, our contribution does not end there. The ECB also plays a role in strengthening resilience and competitiveness in other essential areas, which underpin a dynamic and robust euro area economy. First, let me say a few words about the future of central bank money. We want to ensure that people can continue to use central bank money in all situations of their daily life. As a result, we strongly support the proposed legal tender regulation to ensure that cash remains available and accessible to all, and that no undue restrictions are placed on its use. And we are preparing to issue a third series of euro banknotes with a new design. But cash cannot be used for digital payments, and its share in day-to-day payments is declining as a result. We therefore need to complement physical cash with its digital equivalent, a digital euro. The digital euro will provide consumers a solution that is accepted for any digital payment throughout the whole euro area. It will guarantee the highest level of privacy. The ECB will not have access to personal data. And it will be built on a fully European infrastructure, avoiding an excessive dependency on foreign providers for payment systems that are critical to the functioning of our economy. As co-legislators, you have a key role to play in delivering these benefits by making decisive progress towards the adoption of the digital euro regulation. In parallel, we also aim to make tokenized central bank money available to support the development of an integrated European ecosystem for digital assets. This initiative, which you welcome in your resolution, has two ambitions. The first is to make it possible to settle distributed ledger technology-based wholesale transactions in central bank money. Our project, called Pontes, will deliver a solution for this purpose to the market already this year in the third quarter. Our second ambition is to unlock the full potential of tokenization. Our project, Appia, aims to create a European market for digital assets that is integrated from the outset. The ECB's goal is to develop more resilient and integrated market infrastructures, harnessing digital finance to benefit the euro area economy. Second dimension, where the ECB can help, simplification. Our high-level task force on simplification has recently presented its recommendations for simplifying Europe's regulatory, supervisory, and reporting framework while maintaining a strong and resilient banking sector. These proposals aim to reduce unnecessary regulatory complexity while upholding international standards. A clear, harmonized, and proportionate regulatory framework is vital for a strong financial system that supports the real economy. Yet, as we know, Europe's resilience and competitiveness ultimately depend on a wider policy framework. In this spirit, the Governing Council has provided the European Council with a list of key areas where collective EU action is needed. Advancing the savings and investment union is essential. Swift agreement on the market integration and supervision package will deepen our capital markets and allow Europe to more effectively channel its considerable savings into productive investments. If we are to unlock the full potential of Europe, strengthening the single market will also be essential. And this can be achieved by removing barriers and reducing fragmentation, including through a proposed 28th regime under a regulation, not a directive. Europe also needs to foster innovation and protect open strategic autonomy. Improved coordination of research and development will boost European productivity, while support of strategically relevant sectors and de-risking of critical supply chains will increase resilience. These reforms are not abstract. They are the practical foundations of resilience and sovereignty in a world where economic power is increasingly exercised through finance, technology, and trade. So the ECB's commitment is clear. We remain focused on price stability and fostering a stronger Europe. The euro is an anchor of stability and a powerful symbol of what Europe can achieve when we work together. And as we entered 2026, we also proudly welcomed Bulgaria as the 21st member of the euro family. Membership of the euro area has almost doubled since 1999, and this growth, a testament to the attractiveness of the single currency and the enduring benefits of European integration. A strong currency rests on the solid foundation of strong institutions. An independent ECB that is accountable to the EU citizens through the European Parliament is central to this institutional architecture. As Thomas Mann observed, I quote, "The word, even the most contradictory word, preserves contact. It is silence that isolates." Just as words maintain contact between people, our exchanges preserve the connection between the ECB, the elected representatives, and the EU citizens. Let us therefore maintain this dialogue and pursue, within our respective mandates, a stronger and more resilient Europe. Thank you for your attention.
Grazie.
Thank you very much, President. On behalf of the Commission, Commissioner Dombrovskis, please. You have the floor.
Madam Chair, Madam President, honourable members. It's a pleasure to participate in this debate on Econ draft report on the European Central Bank. And I would like to thank the rapporteur, Mr. Johan van Overveld, and members of the committee for their insightful reflections. The ex post assessment of the ECB activities by the European Parliament is essential for the democratic accountability of the ECB. The Commission acknowledges ECB's strong commitment and decisive action to ensuring price stability and a smooth transmission of the intended monetary policy stance across euro area member states. The Commission welcomes ECB monetary policy measures. They helped to keep inflation expectations anchored and contributed to falling inflation over the last 3 years after the high at the end of the COVID-19 pandemic. Looking ahead and in line with the latest ECB macroeconomic projections, the Commission autumn economic forecast foresees inflation in the euro area to stabilize around 2% over its forecast horizon, broadly in line with the ECB's inflation target, meaning 2% over the medium term. In the short term, the economic picture is encouraging. The euro area and EU economies are expected to continue growing at a moderate pace over the next 2 years, supported by a robust labour market, falling inflation, and improving financing conditions. Also, the deployment of the Recovery and Resilience Facility and other EU funds, notably cohesion, the fiscal stimulus in Germany, the relatively healthy financial position of the corporate sector will support investment. Further support could come from higher than expected defence spending and a continued success in reinforcing and diversifying our trade relationship. At the same time, Europe faces a number of important economic challenges. The global economic environment is becoming increasingly adverse for Europe's competitiveness and resilience. Rising protectionism is weighing on EU exporters and adding to Europe's lingering productivity problem. At the same time, the EU's trade dependencies are being exploited and entails risks for our economic security. Europe, therefore, must double its effort to unlock its full growth potential. We should complete the single market and the savings and investment union, boost innovation, advance pro-competitive reforms, and move forward with the simplification agenda. And we need to diversify our trade partnerships and reduce dependencies. This also means stepping up efforts to take our security in our own hands. The agenda is clear, action is urgent. Turning to the fiscal situation, public deficits and debt ratios have improved significantly since the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we expect less positive developments in the coming years. They largely reflect the need for higher defense spending. Given the multiple demands on public finances and the still high debt levels in some member states, we must be particularly vigilant to safeguard fiscal sustainability. This will require important policy decisions on the composition and quality of public spending as well as revenues. Let me also say a few words on the digital euro. The ECB's technical preparatory work on the digital euro is progressing well. Considering the recent geopolitical developments and in light of the quickly evolving payments landscape, swift progress on the digital euro proposal is more important than ever. We hence welcome the Council's recent adoption of its negotiating position and appreciate the European Parliament's determination to form its position in a timely manner as well. We need a truly autonomous European payment system where digital euro and private solutions are interoperable with each other. More broadly, we need to strengthen the international role of the euro. This means not only a wider use of euro abroad. It also means that we need to reinforce the resilience of our economic and monetary system, to deepen and integrate our financial markets, to foster innovation and competition in the payment systems, to support de-risking and strategic autonomy in a time when the international order is rapidly fraying. We have started the work towards identification of concrete policy actions to navigate current evolving landscape and ensure the Union's capacity to safeguard its interest in an increasingly complex global order. We need to carefully look into new developments such as impacts of the cryptocurrencies, stablecoins and central bank digital currencies on Europe's payment infrastructure, new trades in EU trade and capital flows, and the role of our EU safety nets for macro-financial stability. Of course, we will work closely together with the ECB on these matters. And we will be happy to continue important discussions with this House as well. Thank you.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Commissioner, let's start the debate. Mr. Seekatz, you have the floor.
Frau Präsidentin.
Madam President, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we've seen over the past few years how important it is to have a credible monetary policy here in Europe. Inflation has reached a fairly stable level, which is good news for citizens in Europe. But it's very important that we learn from high inflation phases and we draw our lessons from that. Expectations seem to be going ahead of themselves. We need to ensure that the ECB's independence is the pillar for our monetary union, and this independence requires political neutrality and very strict faith in your mandate. Now, secondary aims should only be followed once the primary mandate has been fulfilled. So this is all about following the treaties. We had crisis instruments, but these measures should not become a permanent fixture because they can distort prices. Climate risks can be taken into account, but only within the actual mandate of the ECB. It's not an authority for climate policy. And something that's very important, finally, simplification is something to be taken seriously, but we need solutions less bureaucracy, less red tape, and solutions for stability in our markets.
Prego, onorevole.
Thank you very much. Ms. Tavares, you have the floor.
Signora Presidente.
Chair, Commissioner, President of the ECB, in the current context of uncertainty, geopolitical pressure and financial fragmentation, the ECB is still a pillar for stability and innovation in Europe and the world. It's kept a cap on inflation, reduced risks and continued to innovate with the digital euro. The ECB knows what to do, how to do it and how to do it differently. One of our priorities was to state the credibility and independence of the ECB, which are two things that need to be protected and we should not take for granted. For a central bank, you can't have credibility without independence, but you can't have independence without credibility. We restate in the report the need for the ECB to keep its current monetary policy instruments like TPI to avoid the market fragmenting and to continue to include climate change as a fundamental part of its strategy. The future will mean that we have to be creative. Topics like stablecoins and crypto assets need special attention to avoid the system fragmenting. Strengthening the international role of the euro means that we have to make rapid progress on the digital euro and think about a real European safe asset. The new strategy for financial literacy should give Europeans new options to save and to invest, thus unblocking millions in investments in the EU, because the future is built on the present. Thank you. Thank you. Now, Mr. Bardella, you have the floor.
Merci, Madame la
Thank you, President of the European Central Bank, colleagues. Madam President, your mandate is clear: to ensure price stability, but no monetary policy can continue over the long term to ignore economic reality. We're seeing increasingly that Europe is not competitive on global scale. China and India have prices that support their exports, but the EU now faces competition, which is not just difficult, but increasingly unfair. Europe is losing market share on international markets. Even on the single market, companies are trying to maintain their share, but they're faced with excessive regulatory burdens. And I think this is a alarm bell for our production sectors. The production sector just shows how dependent we are. You're trying to tax Europe turn it into a vast consumer market rather than a global power in terms of production and innovation. And over the long term, the independence of our markets and our nations is at risk. Since the middle of 2025, rates have not dropped and growth remains fragile. Inflation continues in many member states, including France. The ECB cannot act too late. If you look at the history of the continent's economy, we see that all too often opportunities are missed. So my question is a simple one, but it's key for our economies. Will the ECB be able to adapt its policies to support activities, ensure that our businesses can remain competitive, and to ensure that we can keep up with the growth and power on the rest of the world? This is really what we should be focusing on. Thank you.
Ritrovati colleghi e colleghi, un saluto Lagarde.
Greetings, colleagues, and greetings to Madame Lagarde. And now give the floor to Mr. Crosetto.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the rapporteur as well for the important work that's been done to address the main topics in the activity of the ECB. Turning to this. In the report, the primary objective of the ECB is to keep stability and keep prices stable. And the ECB can say that it has achieved that. And with this main objective, there is a second as well, which follows on. But without prejudice to the price stability, the ECB should support economic policies of the EU. The macroeconomic forecasts tell us that for 2026 and the coming years, the inflation level will be below the 2% target. The energy prices will have the biggest impact on prices, and GDP growth will continue from 1 to 1.5%. So my question, President Lagarde, is what does the ECB expect in terms of the second objective under the TFEU? What do you expect to do in terms of supporting the Union's economic policies? Because in the annual report that we're discussing, the ECB needs to take decisions itself to exercise its mandate without interference or political influence. Then on the annual report, reference is made to the digital euro project, and I wanted to express my support for that and recognition as well for the important work that has been done by the ECB. And I wanted to conclude by appreciating the work that has been done and on simplification with the recommendations and with the ECB, with the help for smaller banks, which I think really does live up to the expectations that we have of a large central bank like the ECB.
Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Vasile Vicolescu.
President Lagarde, dear colleagues, European citizens are asking a simple question. Can we bring inflation down and rebuild confidence that the economy will deliver opportunity again and that it will do it in a sustainable fashion? The ECB is doing the hard work of restoring price stability. Now Europe's political responsibility is to make that stability translate into investment, productivity and good jobs. I listened to your speech earlier very carefully, and it seems to me that three objectives are particularly important in order to achieve that. First, credibility through clarity. In an age of misinformation and uncertainty, people need to understand not only what the ECB decides, but also why. More transparency on the analysis, the scenarios, and the distributional effects strengthens trusts and therefore makes the monetary policy more effective. Second, a stronger financing ecosystem in Europe is important for Europe's businesses. It's essential. We need faster progress on the capital markets union and completion of the banking union so that innovative firms, especially SMEs, and scale-ups can access funding across borders with less fragmentation and less red tape. Europe should not be the continent where savings are abundant, as you mentioned in your speech, but risk capital is still very scarce. Third, European sovereignty in payments and resilience in the digital age. A digital euro can be a public anchor for European payments, but it must also be designed to protect privacy, financial stability and coexist with cash while supporting Europe's payment innovators. Independence is essential, accountability is equally essential. Thank you.
Grazie, mi raccomando i tempi.
Thank you. Please stick to your times. Now, Mr. Eickhout.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good evening, President, good evening, Commissioner. First of all, I really would like to thank the rapporteur for its good cooperation on this report, which really is putting all the elements around the ECB in place. And I also really want to thank you, Madam President, also for the cooperation and the exchange we are having, not only orally, but also quite often in the form of letters. I think what is also very important is that we realize that the inflation rate is going below the 2% now. And every time when I hear Mr. Rapporteur, he's almost obsessed, it seems, with the inflation rates. And it's good to be careful, but at the same time, we also should be very happy that we are now below the 2% and below the target, which also creates a bit of investment room that Europe drastically needs as well. Secondly, also on the digital euro, very much support also from the Greens in order to make sure that we are creating a public and sovereign alternative to third country private providers, and very much welcoming also your work on that. But then, of course, we also need to talk about climate action and what the ECB needs to be doing on that, because sometimes when I hear the EPP, they are saying you should not be ideological, but I always have the feeling that EPP is ideologically against climate action. And let me be very clear. If you are looking at price stability, climate change is one of the biggest threats for future price stability. And just one number from the Network for Central Banks for Greening the Financial System, by 2050, GDP losses because of climate change could be to the level of 15%. 15% of our GDP. This requires that the central bank, because of its financial stability rules, needs to take climate action into consideration. By doing that, for also lowering interest rates for green investments, because they are very capital intensive, so they need that support, but also that we want to see more action from the ECB to explore all your possible instruments to support our economic objectives and minimize the financial stability as a result of the climate crisis, as your mandate stipulates. Thank you very much.
Grazie, onorevole.
Thank you very much. And now Mr. Saramo.
Madam President, the world will not become a better place if we close our eyes. That's why it's important that the effects, for instance, of climate change on monetary policy risks are observed. Large areas of monetary policy will be preserved, but in tomorrow's vote we will hopefully give an important message to everyone, the following. Public money, cash, is getting more and more rare, out of the way of US private money. Payment cards, as well as the growing dollar-denominated cryptocurrencies, are decided on in the US. We are already blackmailed by them, and this is a multi-layered problem for Europe's security and future. What is downright stupid, it's that when we buy a European product from a European shop, we pay a share to a US cartel. It is dangerous that our payment system depends on a leader of a country that is unreliable and increasingly drifting away from democracy. Already now, President Trump is using his power to prevent, for instance, judges investigating war crimes from booking tickets and hotels in Europe. We have fallen in a trap and we have to get out of it. Among the 10 biggest paying intermediaries, there are only US and Chinese, one Indian service providers. We need a secure European public alternative on which Europeans can build private services if they so wish. The ECB has recognized the need for a digital euro for many years ago. It should be implemented already. Parliament must now put an end to this slowing down and let the ECB to do its work. We must not get the US decide on European monetary policy. Thank you.
Благодаря, госпожо президент. Госпожо президент Лагард.
Thank you, Chair. Mrs. Lagarde, this Parliament, dear colleagues, has a clear task of exercising democratic control over the ECB. This is the only European institution that can do that. The report on the ECB that we're discussing today, however, ignores all the important aspects and focuses on the second-hand minor issues and ignoring the elephant in the room. Actually, it does ignore the difficulties related to the level of the cost of living and chooses to talk about the global climate change or Putin as the major threat. And most importantly, there's no reason why the digital euro is being implemented so quickly. Let me point some of them. First, fully fledged alternative like gold and the dollar are fully ignored. The report doesn't say how the confiscation of Russian assets affects the euro. Also, it ignores the fact that massively euros have been coming out of the printing press and how this affects today's situation. Also, what is the effect of the market and the link between the crisis and the competitiveness of the European markets and the companies that are referred to as zombies. Also, how are the new programs going to be implemented in the ECB when the old ones are being phased out? For Bulgaria, the convergence criteria again were ignored and the forecasts turned out to be false. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ferber.
Vielen Dank, Frau Präsidentin.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Madam President of the European Central Bank, Commissioner, colleagues. Independence of any central bank is not a simple technical detail. It's an absolute prerequisite for us to have a currency that's credible, for us to have stable prices. Now, it's only when issuing banks can actually be free from political influence in taking their decisions, only then can we, in the long term, have stability. So this report reminds us, in fact, quite rightly, that the ECB takes their decisions and must do so without any outside political influence. And this is why it's a little bit worrying that the central banks internationally tend to be put under a lot of pressure, especially with the new administration in the US. We need to be the model for the opposite of that here in Europe. Basically, the European Central Bank is interdependent, and this is something that's anchored in what we believe in Europe. But, of course, accountability is also important, and transparency as well. I'm delighted to see you not only here today, Mrs. Lagarde, but thank you for coming regularly to see us in committee. So, of course, this independence doesn't mean we're writing out a blank check. We shouldn't be talking about extension of the mandate of the ECB, for example. We've seen certain decisions in the past being taken which go beyond traditional monetary policy decisions. When we talk about the climate and the environment, this can lead to distortion. Because this is not in the remit of the ECB. Stick with your mandate and you will receive our full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez.
Gracias, President.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, President. It's a pleasure to have this conversation. And I think we should thank the rapporteur, Johan, for the work he's done. It's helped us to reach an agreement on some rather thorny issues. Monetary policy and ECB management is something that we should welcome. We've managed to stick to our objectives. We've managed to ensure that things are slightly better than before Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And I think that in general, monetary policy has been very positive. But what's happening on the other side of the Atlantic, I think, can be an opportunity for Europeans. First of all, when it comes to independence of the ECB. All colleagues have referred to this. I think we need to be focusing on, and the market needs this, the need for Europe to offer an alternative, one that will allow us to occupy the space that it seems that the Americans are leaving. So we need more single market, more banking union. And that's something that I think we should really focus on in all of our conversations. Thank you, Mr. Haider.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Lagarde, you said that monetary policy is in a good place. Who? For whom? For whom is it in a good place? There are millions of citizens who have lost purchasing power, and they've had to stomach that month by month. Inflation has gone up to 15% for certain products, and you said, well, you have held these people hostage with your loose monetary policy. It's not balanced. Families have had to choose between heating or eating. That's not a success story, it's a disaster. This not directional policy, the direction is high levels of debt and bleed the people who are saving, the savers. Capital Markets Union, Banking Union, Digital Euro, Strategic Independence, lots of terms there, but just more power and more centralization for the ECB. Let me say it clearly. We need a stable currency, not a policy that lets citizens freeze and just saying that everything's in a good place.
Hi there, we have a blue card for you from Mr. Druese. Okay, please.
Ja, Herr Kollege, vielen Dank für Ihre Rede. Sie
Thank you. You were talking about the ECB's job of price stability and inflation stability. The President said that in the past there had been 10.8% inflation, but now inflation is back to a normal level. The question is, do you believe that the ECB head, Mr. Lagarde, that they have a realistic take on the inflation rate socially? Well, those at the head of the ECB receive over 700,000 euros for their salary. They're not facing existential problems, but it means real losses for real families, for normal families, and this distance can be seen in these decisions. And in my opinion, the ECB leadership has no idea of the social consequences of their monetary policy. None at all.
Okay, next speaker, Mrs. Malag.
Szanowni Państwo, często słyszymy o traktatowej niezależności.
Thank you. We often hear people talking about independence of the ECB. This sacred independence, however, is it real? Is it really respected? We see the contrary. The ECB is very much committed in political things such as the digital Europe, the green agenda, and other policies, ignoring the social or economic reality on the ground. And the ECB is involved in managing this federalist European project. And these are decisions about sovereignty of nations and autonomy. So who's going to foot the bill for all these mistakes? Well, it's the citizens, isn't it? Because the ECB keeps rates that are hardly abstract. So loan rates, lending rates, this is all about young people who need loans. These are decisions that should be taken by the citizens themselves. For example, can I go on holidays or will I pay my electricity bill? So we have to keep saying this. Stability is what we mean by independence. Manipulation with the economy and the monetary policies and interference, central interference in monetary areas is a disaster, especially if we use it as an instrument to manipulate. Mario Draghi, the former ECB president, So that we need to move from federations to confederations. So you can see the direction that the European Central Bank has taken. We need an independent ECB and not something that's idealizing things or ideologizing for other purposes.
Madame la Présidente Lagarde.
Colleagues, President Lagarde, Commissioner, the banking world has also been rocked by the Trump wave. The US is challenging democracy and even intimidating their own central bank. Now, if they want to play the law of the jungle, then let's remind them there are 450 million Europeans versus 340 million Americans. More than ever, the ECB plays a key role in Europe and throughout the world. In banking, in monetary policy, and in other European policies, Europe should not give in to intimidation. That's a line that you embody, President Lagarde, and you defended robustly in Davos against American attacks against Europe. The ECB is the proof that independent institutions can be responsible and bold. They can remain loyal to or faithful to their mandate with central policies improving inclusion of climate risk by banks and then defending European sovereignty by supporting the Digital Europe, Savings Union and Investment Europe, and then promoting the role of women in finance. There's still a lot of ground to cover in the ECB and in this House as well. More than ever, we need to protect the independence of the ECB, and we are counting on you, Madame Lagarde, to do this.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. von Kortan, you said quite rightly that we shouldn't give in to intimidation from Trump, and we Europeans are strong with the tools that we have. We have monetary tools, and in the economic tools, we have some trade tools. Now, why say one day we need to be strong versus Trump, and then also we need to revisit the negotiations with Donald Trump and stick to them? We should not be giving in to Donald Trump and annexing European territory. Yes, that's a very good question. I do belong to a different group, but we need to, if we resume negotiations, that doesn't mean giving carte blanche to someone. But I do have my doubts about these negotiations, and I do support what you were saying there, Ms. Aubrey.
Onorevole Andresen.
Thank you very much. Mr. Anderson.
Verehrte Frau Präsidentin, sehr geehrte Kolleginnen und Kollegen.
Madam President of the ECB, ladies and gentlemen. Now, we have a question of crises, attacks on the euro, cryptocurrencies from the US. Financial stability is not going to be achieved only through monetary policy, but monetary policy is essential. It mustn't be blind to these threats. The ECB's interest policy has to take note of the weaknesses. It's not responsible for the economic weaknesses, but it is important that you do more than just focus on interest rates, because you're ignoring the real consequences in the economy of these policies. Central banks are under a lot of pressure globally. In the USA, people have said this already, that the Fed and the relationship between that and the US policies is being renegotiated, is being revised totally. And this is important to bear in mind. In the coming years, if we have a new staffing of the ECB, monetary policy and central banks and their role will be on the agenda again. So everything is going to be reshuffled in the next couple of years. So we have to think about the future of the ECB. Separating the primary and the secondary mandate clearly is something that we need to focus on. We have to accept, we have to find acceptance in society of the ECB. And I have to say, with regard to the climate and threats to the climate, the risks, for example, of fossil fuel investments, people are just ignoring these risks, and we cannot continue like this. So I would like the ECB, especially in terms of green monetary policy, to continue along that path and not to dilute it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Aubry.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam President. Madame Lagarde. Recently, you were once again slammed the door at a dinner in Davos following yet another provocation by a member of the Trump administration. Now, it's not that I disagree with you, but it should lead us and our European colleagues to reflect, particularly those who continue to bow down to the American president, even when he's threatening to occupy by force a European territory. Here, everyone agrees that we should have this completely unfair, unequal trade agreement with the US. Madame Lagarde, slamming the door after dinner isn't enough. We have financial tools available to us that can act as a deterrent. For example, using the level of American debt that we partially hold. It's time to cut ties with the US, cutting ties with American services such as Visa and MasterCard. They should be replaced by European tools, 100% public tools. Without that, Trump will just continue doing what he is, and eventually it will be us that has the door slammed in our face. Thank you, Mr. Droese.
Frau Vorsitzende, Frau
Madam Chair, Mrs. Lagarde, colleagues, we're talking about the ECB's annual report, which shows a central bank, above all, that has actually moved right away from its initial mandate. We've seen millions in inflations, millions of people really losing purchasing power, pensions and so on. And now we're talking about the digital euro, seen as a harmless project. It's being sold as such, but it's actually a project that is going to really restrict our monetary freedom. It's a huge experiment. A digital euro harbors huge dangers because it will be very difficult to follow payments, and it will be very difficult to understand who, what, why, and where. What is being done with people's money, taxpayers' money. We have to, look back in history and learn from our mistakes. Mrs. Lagarde, what you're trying to do is to reassure us today, talking about the third series of new banknotes. But the ECB needs to take note of transparency and its actual mandate, and we need to stop this rolling out of power. We need to have supervision and controls in place, and all these things are at stake right now.
Card for you from Mr. Sieper, please.
Vielen Dank, Herr Kollege.
Thank you very much for accepting my blue card. I listened carefully to what you said, especially your appeal to, us using cash. Are you aware that actually the criminals are the ones that really profit from this use of cash? People who are, criminals, drug pushers or whatever, people, who move underground. So shouldn't we be promoting technologies that make us more modern in society, that can, facilitate things for governments and individuals? Thank you for the question. Well, we're talking about the ECB report, so we're talking about price stability above all. Now, we have a lot of doubts about the policies of the ECB. Now, I can't answer those questions in this debate. It's perhaps we could talk about it in a debate on Olaf or something. I'd be very happy to help you if we find ourselves in those circumstances.
Thank you very much, Ms. Rotten-Netzler-Doppler. Ms. Lagarde, your political speech was politically correct, but I had expected more. sanctions not just on Russia, but on others as well that have an influence on our economy. How can we free ourselves from Russian gas? Didn't say anything about that. Now we are dependent energetically on the US. We've got a number of economic problems, but we're dealing with the digital euro and new banknotes. Could we discuss, perhaps, how we could introduce the digital euro? The general public doesn't want this. In Slovakia, the general public is actually against introducing the digital euro. Let's discuss it. Let's discuss economic problems, though. Price stability, that's in your mandate. I understand that. But you also need to bear in mind that you have a lot of influence on how people live. Access to credit for housing, that's got much harder. These are practical problems. With the next annual report, please tell us something about the real economy and not just banknotes.
Thank you, Chair, President Lagarde, Commissioner, dear colleagues. Bringing inflation back to target after the pandemic has been a challenge, but it's been no worse than in any other major economy. So in this regard, let me reiterate what I said on a similar occasion 1 year ago. Well done. But deep down, things are getting much tougher. The challenge to central bank independence is not a US oddity. It is a concerted attack from many fronts at a time of very high public debt. To fend off this attack, invoking the treaty provisions or denouncing the tax elsewhere is necessary, but not sufficient. People's trust on the ECB is anchored on its compromising primary objective, price stability for the good of EU citizens. A clear and narrow mandate strengthens accountability, anchors expectations, and ultimately makes independence easier to defend in a democratic society. When central banks expand into areas that are perceived as going beyond this core mission, even with very good intentions, it exposes itself to growing political pressure. Safeguarding central bank independence today demands from us politicians to respect institutional lines and for central banks to avoid mission creep. Monetary policy should never be subordinated to fiscal considerations or to other objectives that belong to the realm of elected policymakers like climate actions or strategic autonomy. President Lagarde, it is not easy to self-restrict ECB's capability when so many legitimate but conflicting objectives are requested from you. But in so doing, you will be cementing ECB's independence, which is Europe's most valuable asset. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you. Ms. Laluc, you have the floor.
Thank you. Yeah, no worries.
Madame la Présidente, Madam President, Commissioner, colleagues, I want to talk to small traders. Their commissions have exploded this year on the American card payments. All our means of payment are American, and people in Europe have understood what this means to be in the grip of Trump's administration. I want to tell these people that it is possible for all our means of payments to be European. I want to tell them that we could already have had something like that if we, had done what was necessary. We had the digital euro, which has been very late coming in because of the opposition from the banks. Let's be honest, they gain from the situation at the moment because, of the policies in place. But I think it is time that we release the Europeans. It's time to release them from the clutches of the Americans, and it is time to insist, for you as Europeans, to insist that we have a digital Europe. Ask your banks, ask your MEPs.
Thank you. Just 1 second. Mr. Eroglu, you have the floor.
Ja, sehr geehrte Frau
Vice President, Commissioner Dombrovskis, President Lagarde. In your term in office, inflation has been higher than ever, unfortunately. We've spoken about it a lot here in this House. At the end of the day, I think it's okay when you make mistakes if you correct them, and you have gained my trust in recent years. You stopped the sale of bonds. The treaty's been respected. That's the right path to take, to create trust. And now, Mr. Dombrovskis, you were listening carefully as well. We need to talk about banking union. But a banking union has to make sure that not everything is put in one pot. But you said clearly we need a simplification agenda. But we need a deregulation agenda, Mr. Dombrovskis. Be brave about that. We need deregulation so that the economy can work properly. We've got the stable euro, courtesy of Ms. Lagarde. We don't need any other new tasks. Thank you very much. Mr. Tidico, you have the floor.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. President Lagarde, we are in favour of introducing the digital euro, and the report on the ECB, together with 47 members from different political groups, will be tabling 2 amendments, which we think are important. We think that given the current geopolitical context in which economic relations are more fragile, then Europe has to strengthen its own strategic autonomy, including when it comes to payment systems. Now, 2 electronic transactions out of 3 in Europe are based on non-European infrastructure. Visa and MasterCard dominate, and this puts our strategic autonomy at risk in the payment systems. We need to have a genuinely European independent public payment system which will strengthen our monetary sovereignty and cut costs, as well as helping to help to control the flows of money. This is the future of Europe. This is the big project for our autonomy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Tidico. Now followed by Mr. Gottink.
Thank you, Chair. Madam Lagarde, Commissioner, the discussion over independence of the ECB is one that we have to have here, and it comes because of the attack by Trump on the Fed and your colleague Jerome Powell. It's good that you showed, even in Davos, that things work differently in Europe, and it should remain this case. And I think it's a bit concerning that when I listen to Mr. Bardella, he seems to be predicting a French resolution, and he wants to change the mandate of the ECB. The Greens seem to do the same thing with the climate crisis. We have to ensure that independence is the basis of our stability here in Europe. We see that the dollar is losing value. We have to ensure that the Europe becomes a world currency and is used more outside of Europe. But we can't talk about reforms in member states. We haven't heard about any genuine reforms today about tax, pensions, the labour market. There are also ways to strengthen the Europe. And it shouldn't just be done on an international basis and through geopolitics. We can begin here, and we must do that. Because, President, I hear a lot about safe assets, about Eurobonds, but very little about reform. Eurobonds seem to be a shortcut to avoid doing the real work. It's good, I think, Madam President, that our Commissioner, Mr. Dombrovskis, is working on the simplification agenda. I think we really need to work on this to ensure that our economy can move forward. That's something that we all very much need. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bayada.
Thank you, President. Commissioner, when we talk about the central bank in Europe, we need to look at the numbers and we need to see them from the eyes of the people. For example, inflation. Inflation is not statistic data. It is the bill at the shops, the rent and the interest rates and the anxiety of people and of small businesses who see their expenses increase and their purses shrink. We need stability because when we had problems with rates going, interests going high, the Europeans were left alone. And when the government tried to help them with subsidies, they were criticized. But if we want a monetary policy to be stable, it needs to be also in tune with the realities of every day, the realities of the families that can't see beyond the present, and of small businesses and of young people. Economic success depends also on the trust of people, on the opportunities it creates, and also on the dignity that it...
Thank you very much. Mr. Boyer, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, President Lagarde, the digital euro was decided before the election of President Trump. Now it's vital. All the member states and all citizens now have this possibility of a payment system. And the digital world is growing, and the ECB has a proposal we can discuss. The Commission and the Council are working on it with the general approach at the Council, but we colleagues have to act on this. This is a complex, multidimensional subject that we need to address. At the vote on Johan's report, excellent report, there are 2 amendments where we can take a strong position on this subject and to start negotiations based on a positive vote for a ambitious digital euro. So I call on everyone to vote in favour of those 2 amendments. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Aftias.
Commissioner, Mrs. Lagarde. Now, we've had interviews in Athens, and now here you are. Nice to see you here in the European Parliament. Now, how can anybody disagree with what you have to say? You've managed something else very important in 2022, 10.6% inflation. It's under 2% today. Nobody, Commissioner, can really say that the ECB has not been successful. But every shift, every change has to be felt in the pockets of the European citizens. And many of these competition and various problems all these problems are going to be solved by the euro, the digital euro that you are announcing. And stability in monetary policy is not something you find in a lot of countries. So we'll have cheaper housing, we'll have cheaper energy, we'll have a greater drop in high costs and inflation. And I come from a country, Greece, which has had 3 memoranda. I remember the 3rd very well indeed, and you probably do too. Commissioner, Mrs. Lagarde, the European Central Bank is something you can make the European Bank of Citizens. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Regner, you have the floor.
Dankeschön.
Thank you very much. President, Commissioner, price stability is important, but it's not a means in itself. It has to serve people. Secure jobs, stable wages, social cohesion. The inflation crisis has shown us how vulnerable our society and economy are when energy prices and shocks from outside spiral, which is why we need a monetary policy that anchors this with social responsibility. The digital euro is an opportunity for Europe. It improves our independence in a new world order. The key thing here is that the digital euro should serve citizens with data protection that's robust, and it shouldn't replace cash. An independent ECB is important and leads us into a digital era is even more important. And it's so great to have you here in this house and to have this exchange of views with us regularly. Thank you very much. Now, Mr. Falcone, you have the floor.
Grazie, Presidente.
Thank you, President. In 2025, the ECB showed balance in European monetary policy. On interest rates, we would, however, expected more courage to give more strength to our economy and more liquidity and to the real economy. 2025, however, was distinguished by an extraordinary technological project. Here I'm referring to the creation of the digital euro. The ECB has laid the foundations for an additional digital currency, as well as a new payment system, both on and offline. This is necessary to strengthen the autonomy of the EU. That's why in 2024 we already wanted to focus a specific chapter in the ECB report on the digital euro. There was, however, only just a reference to it. But tomorrow we will firmly support the 2 amendments on the digital euro. And we'll do that because we believe this means defending not just the project, but also guaranteeing that Europe has monetary strategy and sovereignty that is needed to ensure competitiveness for Europe and to ensure that our territory can compete with other foreign competitors and territories. We have to be up to this challenge. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Papandreou.
Chair, Commissioner, Madame Lagarde, good to see you again. You come here very often, which shows the democratic accountability of the ECB. So since we mentioned the digital euro, and that's in the report, you know that every time we use our cards, 85% of the time, some of the money goes across the Atlantic. But not only that, even the European cards, they have to use Visa, MasterCard software in the POS, those little machines that we pay with. So imagine, maybe not so crazy, that the United States is not happy with Denmark for obvious reasons. We could turn off Visa, MasterCard for a week or two to make them hurt. It happened in Russia, and it's happened with ICJ judges. So it's not so extreme to talk about sovereignty. But it's not only about pay systems. This is about financial stability. We now have a dizzying array of currencies, including the stable coin, which will reduce the levers of power for the ECB to control things like inflation. We're going to have non-banking pay systems. So for me, the digital euro, and for all of us here, most of us, I hope, we believe that sovereignty means a digital euro, publicly owned, accountable to the public, and democratic accountability. Thank you very much.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Ms. Pereira, you have the floor.
Up and down.
Thank you very much, Chair, President Lagarde, colleagues. Inflation falling, normalized interest rates, sustainable debts, that's all good news, but let's not ignore the challenges that still face us. Living costs. Inflation has dropped, but it's unequal in a number of countries, and pressure is there on families. That's not economic normality for people. The independence of the ECB does not mean isolation. The decisions do have major impacts on people's lives. They require transparency and democratic responsibility to this Parliament on this side of the Atlantic, we can be proud of the results, but also with the independence with which they have been achieved. Thirdly, the awareness that monetary policy cannot solve everything. We cannot ask the ECB to do everything and fail in the reforms that depend on ourselves for more competitiveness and more growth and more democracy. We expect the ECB to be rigorous, but we need to be courageous and we need to be determined as well. Thank you. Now we'll move on to Catch the Eye. We have a number of requests, and we'll start with colleague Grappini.
Thank you, President. Mrs. Lagarde, Commissioner. Of course, we are talking here about the apparent success of the European Central Bank. But from my point of view, and I'm representing here the citizens from my own country, I would like to ask you, Mrs. Lagarde, did you ever try to see the social effects of your monetary policy on the member states? Because we have member states who are in the Eurozone and those who are not in the Eurozone. In my country, the interest rates are 3 times higher than in the Eurozone. The electricity costs twice what it costs in the Eurozone. How do you think that people in my country feel about this? Don't you think maybe, since we talk about banking union, after all 27 states have contributed to the creation of the ECB. Shouldn't we think of policies that should have social effects as well? Not long ago, we talked about the housing crisis in all member states, not just in Romania. Maybe we should do something to help solve this crisis. I think that monetary policy has not fulfilled its role because it did not take into account the socio-economic situation.
Tinkinen.
Arvoisa puhemies.
President. One of the core promises of the euro area has been economic growth. However, from the perspective of smaller member states, this promise has not been fulfilled. In Finland, we sometimes envy our neighbors, and it easily starts when we start comparing ourselves with our neighboring countries. Zloty country Poland and euro country Slovakia have followed completely different paths in terms of economic growth in Poland's favor. Krona country Sweden has left euro country Finland completely behind in economic growth. Of course, the policies pursued in these countries also play a role. But what Finland and Slovakia have in common is that a single EU monetary policy does not work for everyone, especially not for small countries. So the euro didn't bring any growth, and what do we now expect from the European Central Bank? Price stability, not greening policies or tender distributions, which some of the colleagues here are trying to push onto its mandate. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Nimucho.
Madam Lagarde, if you are serious about bolstering Europe's resilience and competitiveness, then make good on your commitment here this evening and ensure that the citizens of Europe can continue to use central bank money in all situations, all communities, all parts. By money, I mean cash, because cash is king and queen. And the voters have told me that, Madame Lagarde. In their thousands, they want the choice of using their cash along with or without the digital euro. Madame Lagarde, make good, I ask you, on your commitment this evening to support the legal tender regulation to ensure cash remains available, accessible to all. No undue, unintended or hidden restrictions on its use, and never a replacement of it. Also drive forward the EU Savings and Investment Union and the simplification of regulatory framework. We are drowning in red tape in banking and businesses throughout Europe. I urge you to work with Ireland's presidency at the end of this year and make good on your commitments here this evening. Suivez les verts. Travaillons ensemble. Merci.
Follow the Greens. Let's work together. Thank you very much. Ms. Yomanasi Shovaka.
Mulțumesc. Thank you. It all sounds great, doesn't it? On paper, it looks great in reports. But please get back down to earth. And with us here, regular people, please understand that in Romania, over 70% of Romanians live in poverty, 30% of them in dire conditions. And Madame Lagarde, what you're saying, that citizens are being represented here in the European Parliament, is a lie. Because with the exception of a few people, a handful of people who care about citizens and raise these issues, nobody here cares about them. They care about banks and all these their interests. Please remember that 80% of Bulgarians did not want the euro. We were talking about the digital euro, but organized crime, this is a gift to them. They use this money for prostitution, for pedophilia, for drugs. And not only that, please look at the Russian oil paid by India to Russia in Chinese coin. And we've resolved historic problems, and the dollar is going down. Then the BRICS coin is based on gold. What guarantees the digital euro? And please do not forgo cash. Without cash, we will never agree to a digital coin. Thank
you. Now we'll allow Commissioner Dombrovskis on behalf of the Commission to reply.
Madam President, honourable members, I'm pleased to see a large convergence of views on many aspects of the report. Our priority is clear: boosting Europe's competitiveness. Stable prices are key for our economy to be resilient and competitive, and the ECB is delivering on this crucial mandate. Also, sustainable and growth-friendly public finances are key to underpin Europe's competitiveness and prosperity. The reformed fiscal framework allows to achieve these objectives. Together, we need to redouble our efforts to unlock Europe's full growth potential. As I mentioned in my introductory remarks, we should reform and invest more. We should complete the single market and savings and investments union, boost innovation, and move forward with simplification. We also need to move ahead with the digital euro, and we look forward to this House to determine its position soon. We'll be happy to continue these important exchanges and discussions with this House. Thank you.
Now we'll allow President Lagarde the possibility of replying as well.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Vice President. And again, thank you very much, Monsieur le Rapporteur. You have clearly focused on some issues that are of concern to everyone in this forum. And I'm only going to focus on a few matters, because I cannot, unfortunately, address each and every single question that you've raised. But I want to thank all of you for the questions that you have put, for the concerns that you have expressed, and for the recommendations that you have given. This is not in waste. This is something that we take into account and that we not only pay attention to, but on which we follow up. So let me focus on two things which in a way come together. The first one that you have mentioned, and many of you have, and you, Monsieur le Rapporteur, have focused extensively on that, and you have actually very much so in your point 1 on governance explicitly quoted the Article 127 of the TFEU, which is, for me, the compass that we have to follow. And this article is very simple because it expresses what is our primary objective and what are the secondary objectives, provided that we have complied with the first objective. And this is really what guides us in the work that we do. It will not be different in the future, and it does not stop us from incorporating and embedding in our projection, in our assessment of the collaterals that we take, the climate change risks that are associated with conducting an economic activity. Does that mean that we are makers, that we are policy makers in that field? Absolutely not. We are policy takers, And this is how it will continue to be. The second area that I want to focus on is something that many of you across the aisles have actually mentioned, and that is the independence of the central bank. And I'm very grateful for the independence that you've acknowledged, for which you have associated accountability, but which we will be extremely loyal to. And you've compared that with what happens in other countries around the world. Now, that independence ensures that we keep control of our monetary destiny. And as those of you who follow what we do, our monetary stance is a combination of three components: the inflation outlook, with surrounding risk and based on the financial information that we receive, the underlying inflation, and the transmission of our monetary policy. Why is that? Because there is greater heterogeneity in the euro area. But we need to make sure that through all member states, part of the euro area, 21 of them now, our monetary policy is properly transmitted. That requires that we have a sufficiently high degree of supervision of our financial markets, that the financial market is stable, and that we keep a degree of independence. And that is the segue to what you will be discussing, I hope in short order, which is the digital euro. So let me make one point very clear. The digital euro is in no way intended to replace cash. Absolutely not. Cash is queen. I heard one of you say that. Indeed it is, and it should be available, and the legal tender on which you will form a view will actually deliver on this principle that cash has to be honored as a mean of payment. But in the same vein, as our world is becoming more digital, we need to be able to pay in all circumstances, and there are many instances where if you provide cash, it's not going to work. If you buy digitally, it is not going to work. Hence the digital euro, which has to be available. But that's also a way to be independent. And that's also a way to offer, as one of you has indicated, the standards of these railroad, if you wish, to think about that, on which currencies and any kind of financial assets can travel. If we do not have the digital euro with the standards that are set as a result, in order to set up the railguards on which currencies and financial assets will travel, we will continue being on the railroads offered by non-European providers of services. And this is not independence. This is not European sovereignty. And to those who indicate that we will come too late, you hold the keys to how fast it can be delivered. So I will really implore that you move forward with the proposal that the Commission has produced, that has been endorsed by the Council, and on which, as Mr. Boyer mentioned, you hold the keys. It's an important element of our sovereignty, our independence, our capacity to deliver monetary policy. Final point, I would observe to those who think that I have no clue about what's going on in the real world, that I actually do. And I would encourage you to see how we actually try to segregate and disaggregate as much as we can how people are affected by inflation. How energy costs in particular, for instance, have gone down significantly. How food is still going up and higher than our 2%. How goods are way below that and how services are still too high. So we pay attention on a very granular basis as to what people actually pay for. And we know that it's different from one member state to the other. And our honor is to try to deliver that price stability and to respond to the credibility of the euro, which I will remind you is valued by about 80% of our European compatriots. And we will continue to honor that commitment and to be accountable to you. I thank you very much.
Grazie a lei, Presidente. Thank you very much, President Lagarde. We'll now give the floor back to the rapporteur, Mr. Van Overtveld, for his responses.
Thank you, President Lagarde, President, colleagues, Commissioner. I would first of all like to thank the shadow rapporteurs, the chair of the Econ Committee and Parliament Services for the work that led to this report. A few brief comments to conclude. First, price stability must remain the undisputed anchor of our monetary policy. It has been repeated several times, and although Mr. Eickhout has already left the room, I want to reassure him that I'm a little bit too old to get overexcited, certainly on monetary matters. But when the discussion is on price stability, I tend to get indeed a little bit excited, I hope in the good sense. Second remark, the independence of the ECB is not a technical detail, that has also been said and emphasized. It is a cornerstone of economic stability. And as a third point, President Lagarde, the digital euro. I am absolutely convinced that the reasoning behind the digital euro, the problems behind the digital euro are real. The payment system is, of course, dominated by two companies that we all know, and that leads to, let's say, monopolistic elements that are, in the present geopolitical situation, quite dangerous. I'm not convinced, and I'm honest towards you, that the digital euro is the best answer to these problems. I'm not saying that I'm against, absolutely not, but I'm still a little bit skeptical whether the digital euro is the best answer. But we are good at finding compromises here in this House, and I'm sure that also on the digital euro we will, at the end, find each other. Thank you very much.
Grazie molte.
Thank you very much. That brings the debate to a close. Vote, as you know, will take place tomorrow. We'll now move on to the next point on today's agenda, which is Parliament's statements on the occasion of the World Cancer Day. We'll just wait perhaps a couple of moments for President Lagarde to greet colleagues and leave the room. And then afterwards, we'll give the floor to Mr. Sokol.
Poštovana potpredsjednice,